we go. Here we go. What's up, NBA fan? What's up, all sports fans? This your boy, JB, host of the Behind the Bench Podcast Network channel. Giving a shout out to the rest of the crew, Shad, Kelvin, Jermaine, KB Film Room, and Big Dog Talk Sports. That's right, that's right. Everyone who's tuning in today, thank you for supporting Behind the Bench. Subscribe to the channel and help make this show the best that it can be. And I'm going to tell you, the crew, along with myself, the entire crew, we're proud of this channel. Now, we don't have a ton of subscribers, man, and for whatever reason, we don't get a lot of views as other content providers, but the way I look at it is everything is about timing, and I always say quality should be held in greater esteem than quantity, because once your quality is established, the quantity will follow. I'm proud to do this one right here because I'm a person who tries to not carry out aspersions and just say things just to be saying it. And like I say, I've been a fan and a follower of the NBA, the National Basketball Association, for a very long time. I chose to do it. You know, I always gravitated to the sport, as millions of other sports fans have done. But the reason that I really uphold the history even more to a greater degree now than I ever did is because what has transpired over the past 15 years. And as we see, this player empowerment madness is beginning to rear its ugly head with the news that just broke about what's going on with the Los Angeles Clippers. But they are a reflection of the problem that has its roots that was planted over a decade ago. Now, this is for the fans of the Hurricane. And this is why I say manipulation is a very powerful tool. But it's those moments where feelings and emotions are expressed and ideas or thoughts are expressed in real time, where people are going to reveal how they like things to be or what they want to see happen to benefit them a lot of times. And when it comes to the NBA, when it comes to the Hurricane, I want to share this article right here. Now, we hear all this talk in recent times about the past NBA being trash. All they had back then was plumbers and firemen. That the game was like prehistoric. They had no skill. They relied on brute force to defeat their opponent. Just total, utter hyperbole and nonsense and BS. Now, as I say, I don't compare eras. But the one thing that was compromised during this most recent era of NBA basketball from the previous decade was the art of competition. That's what curtailed the era. That's what led fans of previous generations and eras to speak out. And speak out against what was taking place. Now, you know how this agenda to convince the newfound or the youth generation of NBA fans that expansion watered down the league. Particularly, they want to target the years that one Michael Jordan played in because he dominated in such a fashion where his greatness was unquestioned and it was unequivocal and it was absolute in nature. But this is something that the Hurricane said after he joined forces with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. Now, mind you, because of the fact that the superstar mentality was compromised, Dwayne Wade is seen nothing more than an all-star level player. Chris Bosh is like an afterthought. He is seen as a high-level role player. And it just shows you how devalued competition became. But to rationalize the decision to leave his franchise in Cleveland and join forces, this was reported by one Brian Windhorst. And you see the date of this article? December 22nd of 2010. The Hurricanes' first year in Miami. Now check this out though. Let's read what he said. This won't make LeBron James popular at the next players union meeting, but Thursday he suggested the NBA would be more entertaining if there was contraction of teams. So contraction is like eliminating teams from existing to where you reduce the number of teams that represent the NBA as a whole. This is what he said. Now check this out. Let's delve into what he said here. In defending his decision to join up with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh on the Miami Heat, James said the league was better when numerous teams had multiple stars. He said he hopes the league can return to that someday because right now there isn't enough talent to support the 30 current teams. Hopefully, the league can figure out, quote unquote, hopefully the league can figure out one way where it can go back to the 80s where you had 3 or 4 all-stars, 3 or 4 superstars, 3 or 4 Hall of Famers on the same team. James said, the league was great. It wasn't as watered down as it is now. He said that about the league that he was currently actively playing in. But he said it to rationalize why he went to Miami to join forces. So if he's saying that the league is watered down, he's mainly referring to the conference that he was playing in the Eastern Conference. What he's saying is the degree of difficulty was not as great as what we witnessed during the 80s and the 90s. So when we try to express, fans who grew up watching the NBA during the 80s and 90s, when we try to explain to this man's fans that the level of competition devolved during his active participation as a player, particularly in the Western Conference. He's not referring to particularly in the Eastern Conference. He's not referring to the talent level in the Western Conference. He's referring to what he was going up against in the Eastern Conference. So what he's saying is the league was more competitive then as a whole. But he's in his mind, he is suggesting that the league go back to mimic what we saw, or not mimic, but replicate what we saw in the 80s and 90s. But since he said the 80s, let's talk about the 80s. And when he said that started the talk by a lot of these nays and says on these airwaves that the league always had super teams in the past. And this is where everything gets convoluted and confusing and distorted and misrepresented. What you had back then for long-standing teams who were dominant, you had all-time championship teams. And every team that proved to be dynastic or had let's say a run that averaged 7 to 8 years, those teams were built from the ground up. And what has happened over the past decade, particularly through the 2010s, we have devalued what it means to become an all-star or what it means to be viewed as a superstar or what it means to be viewed as a Hall of Famer. When you speak of the NBA from a position of revising history, when you say, well, the Celtics had 4 or 5 Hall of Famers. Well, in real time, when they generated their run, it wasn't about them being Hall of Fame players. It was about them becoming great players while they was rising to the top of the NBA landscape. And by the time they reached the end of their career, then you look back and analyze what they achieved to determine or to view them as deserving of Hall of Fame recognition. So when you had a team like the 86 Celtics, an all-time historic team, you didn't hear people say they got 4 or 5 Hall of Famers. You heard them say they had the best front court in basketball that was built by the organization. When you say the Pistons had this dynamic team that went 10 deep, that team was built over a period of 7 to 8 years. Same thing applies for the Chicago Bulls. Same thing applies for the Philadelphia 76ers, who went to 2 finals. Actually, he went to 3 finals from 1977, then 1980, then 1982. They was right there on the brink of winning the title. They was missing that one piece. And they traded for Moses Malone, and they led them to the promised land, and they won the title. But they had their core players, starting with Dr. J, who they brought over from the ABA. It was almost like they drafted him again. Then Bobby Jones from the ABA. I believe he started his career with the Denver Nuggets of the ABA before they was adopted by the NBA. And then they drafted players like the Daryl Dawkins, the Andrew Tonys, and the Maurice Cheeks. See, what LeBron James at the time, what he did not acknowledge was those teams were built. It's a different dynamic than superstars joining forces. And what I mean by that is, when you look at Showtime Lakers, when you look at the 80 Celtics, when you look at the bad boy Detroit Pistons, when you look at the Chicago Bulls, to build their championship rosters, They wasn't poaching players from other teams to do it. They didn't compromise the competitive fabric of the league. Now you had bad teams back then. That's in any league. You're gonna have great teams, you're gonna have bad teams. That's what you call the art of competition. But what I'm saying is, when he say 3 or 4 all-stars, well, when the Lakers draft someone like a James Worthy, he still had to prove his value as a player, as a rookie. He wasn't ready-made when he joined the Lakers. He was drafted when he joined the Lakers. Same thing with Byron Scott. Also, those players were more developed and prepared to excel at the NBA level as rookies because on average, they completed 3 years of college basketball or 3 years of basketball at the collegiate level. So when LeBron says the Hurricane that he felt the league was watered down and why he called for or came up with the idea for the league to contract teams, well, what was going on was it was a byproduct of accelerating the process of bringing players into the league prematurely before they was really prepared to compete at this level. That's what was going on. See, it's not a question about talent. It's a question of the issue. The root of the problem is trying to hasten the process of bringing in players into the league when they're not ready. And what happens is they have potential, but they're not performing as expected because they're not ready. What does that lead to? Impatience. What does that lead to? Discontent with the front office. They're not doing enough. Someone got to make moves. The front office is incompetent. So, when you join forces and leave your team, or 2 superstars leave a team and join forces with a 3rd superstar, well, what you did was, what you perceived as being watered down prior to you joining forces, you actually watered down by joining forces. Because you destabilized 2 franchises from having the potential to qualify or be good enough to compete in the postseason. You eliminate 2 teams from the playoff landscape. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what happened to Cleveland. That's what happened to Toronto. So to rationalize that decision, the talking heads had to try to convince the newfound fans, not fans such as myself, that you always had super teams. But the fact of the matter is, you did not. The term super team didn't even exist in the lexicon of the NBA landscape until the summer of 2010. That's why he made that suggestion that the league contract. Because the only way to form a super team, you're poaching players from other organizations. And that's why in this article, this is just part of it, but he made a mention of, let's say, if we can take Brook Lopez, a player like Kerry Kittles, and be able to take them off of the teams that they're currently on who's not performing, that will make the league more exciting. But see, at that moment, what you're doing is you're devaluing competition. That's not what happened back then, because no matter how deep those teams were, the onus was still on the superstar to lead the team to whatever their potential was or expectation was. It was still, the onus was still on Larry Bird to lead Boston to the top. The onus was still on Magic Johnson to lead the Lakers to the top. The onus was still on Isaiah Thomas to be the leader of the Detroit Pistons and help lead them to the top. The onus was on Michael Jordan to lead his team to the top. And in the 90s, Akeem Olajuwon, the onus was on him to lead his team to the top. And every other superstar was expected to do the same thing, whether they won or not. The onus was still on the superstar. The super team era put the onus on the front office to produce a roster that was stacked to deck to help the superstar win. That's the difference between a super team and what you would consider an all-time championship team, or a team that proved to become a dynasty. So really, in essence, the seeds of the super team originated in this last 2 years of his first run in Cleveland, because that's what they were doing. They were extracting players from other teams within the conference. They took two players from Chris Bosh's own team in Toronto, and Jamario Moon and Anthony Parker, which made the Toronto Raptors incapable of being able to compete in the lesser conference. So when that formula didn't work, he took it to the point of no return when he joined forces with another top 5 player and a top 10 player. But what's funny is, he said the league was exciting then in the 80s, which it was. It was the golden era of the 80s and the 90s. But now the talking heads are trying to convince you that the NBA was trash, and they consist of nothing but plumbers and firemen. And that's how you know all this is nothing but talk. See, the rubber is about to hit the road. The player empowerment era is coming to a screeching halt, especially with this new CBA. And actually, as a byproduct of all of this nefarious activity of the past 15 years, the league has had to respond by over penalizing everybody else to try to stave off superstars continuing any attempt of acting in this manner. And this is why I support the teams out there that's building their roster the right way and sticking with their drafted talent and their young players and developing them. And as a result, they are now winning. So really, in essence, it's not the super team era that rekindled the spirit of the 80s and 90s. It's actually this newfound era that's about to do it. The OKCs, the Minnesota T-Wolves, the Houston Rockets, to a degree, the Memphis Grizzlies, if healthy. It's always a team out there. The Cleveland Cavaliers, the New York Knicks, the Orlando Magics, the Indiana Pacers. So what I'm saying is this. That decision of the summer of 2010, it literally turned the entire axis of the NBA upside down. And it didn't produce the results for the individual that this was designed for, this was staged for, this was promoted for. And therefore, as a result, to try to uphold it, they have to tear everything down from the past. The very foundation of the league, the history of the game. And this is why the history is going to win out. The stars are lining up. See, the era that's going to take the hit is the era that was built on manipulation and total disregard for the game and the history thereof. That's the era that's going to take the hit. Now, the exceptions are the teams that stay the course and the superstars who did not cave in and buck that trend. They going to stand. The Giannis's, the Jokic's, the Shays, players like that. And I would say Steph Curry to a large degree because he's played his entire career for one franchise. The Tatums, Jason Tatums, any superstar out there, even if they haven't won a championship yet, that's representing their franchise the right way, they will get their just due in due time. And also, as I always like to say, my young core, the LA Lakers, they're going to get their just due in the end of being the greatest young core that was ever brought forth in the NBA under the one and done system. This whole super team era has really been an anomaly and has never been real or genuine or sustainable. It's been chaotic. It's been toxic. And as a result, the NBA is taking a major hit for it. But it's starting to recover, though. It's starting to recover. And I do see good things in store for the league in the future once they get past this malaise. But I'm going to read what he said one more time, and I'm going to shut this bad boy down. This was back in December 22nd of 2010, reported by Brian Windhorst, ESPN. This won't make LeBron James popular at the next player union meeting, but Thursday he suggested the NBA would be more entertaining if there was contraction of teams. In defending his decision to join up with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh on the Miami Heat, James said the league was better when numerous teams had multiple stars. He said he hopes the league can return to that someday because right now there isn't enough talent to support the 30 current teams. Hopefully the league can figure out one way where it can go back to the 80s where you had 3 or 4 all-stars, 3 or 4 superstars, 3 or 4 Hall of Famers on the same team. James said the league was great. It wasn't as watered down as now. So what he's saying is, particularly when it comes to his conference, the Eastern Conference of the 80s and the 90s was 10 times more competitive than the one that he played in. Basically from 2003 to 2018. So, I just want to drop that nugget. I don't have nothing to prove. I'm a lifelong fan of this league. And I just want the league to return back to its former glory and its prominence. And let's remove, as they say, kick the ballistics, G. That's what it comes down to. So I just want to drop that nugget. Please leave your comments and thoughts. And until next time, as I always love to say, this is your boy, JB, BTB, Behind the Bench.